out there was that if we rode with the Marine Patrol in the water surrounding the base, that we might get to see some space junk that occasionally falls in the water surrounding the base. Now, I had forgot about them telling us that when we first got there. We all just kind of laughed it off, and I remember thinking that's something I would not want to do, especially if it's, been somewhere else and it falls in the water. I didn't want to touch the thing, whatever it was. So some interesting things happened, when I had time to look back on the place after I left. One of the days that I was in Humvee, when we were doing marijuana eradication, I had stopped on a dirt road not far from the site C6, where I was there. And I had to make a nature call. So I heard like a twig crack or something behind me, and I looked over, and it was about 10 guys dressed in black. They had black camouflage faces, and they had these like rappelling helmets like special forces would use. They weren't like regular military helmets. And where we were billeted there, it was about 5 miles away from the Army Ranger camp where we were. So after I left Eglin, a few years later, I had mentioned to my mother about what happened to us in Hull, Georgia, back in the 70s, and she about jumped out of her chair when I mentioned it. She said, "You remember that?" I said, "Yeah, I remember it very well, because I'd always thought that maybe it was a dream, but I remember us going through a barbed wire fence the next day. The next day after that happened, we had a barbed wire fence at the end of the trailer park. So you have, let me give you a picture of what the trailer park looked like. It had like 4 trailers on one side, 4 on the other. To me as a kid it looked huge, but going back years later it's just a small place. But then you had like a gravel driveway that went through the middle of it, and at the end there was a barbed wire fence and a big field next to where we lived. So the next day we go through the barbed wire fence, and I remembered us standing around a huge burnt circle.
With so many options, why choose Arizona State University?
For me, the only online option was ASU because of the quality. Their faculty was really involved with their students and care about your personal journey. The dedication to my personal development from my professors, that's been extremely valuable to me.
Earn your degree from the nation's most innovative university. Online, that's a degree better. Explore more than 300 undergraduate, graduate, and certificate programs at asuonline.asu.edu. At Arizona State University, we're bringing world-class education from our globally acclaimed faculty to you. Ranked #1 in innovation for 10 consecutive years and #2 among public universities for employability, ASU isn't just ahead of the curve, it's creating new paths to success. Earn your degree from the nation's most innovative university. Online, that's a degree better. Explore more than 300 undergraduate, graduate, and certificate programs at asuonline.asu.edu.
Ground, and she was really surprised that I remembered it, and I asked her about it, and she had never told me what happened that night, because I remembered seeing it. I remember, getting behind her. She said that I kept trying to look around her to see it, but what she told me was that she had seen it land, and that when she seen like a ramp come out of the thing, she said that's when she got us and took us in the house and locked the door. And I asked her why, they never called the police. I said, "Did you ever talk to anybody about it?" She said no, because a lot of people were having sightings down there back in those days, and that they were putting people in mental institutions and locking them up for reporting it, and that people were coming up missing. So I met a guy that actually worked at Site C6. I met him through Reddit, and he had worked at the at the site from 1981 to 84. I think I gave you our chat transcripts from what I talked to him about, but
Yes.
I told him how impressed I was with the place and if there was any truth to, what I read on the wall there. He said absolutely. He said that they definitely tracked UFOs from there when he worked there. He told me that he had friends that he was told that committed suicide, that he never saw their bodies, and that the place had been sued several times over the years, that the radar itself was so strong, like if birds fly through it, they would evaporate. I mean, just blow them up. It was that strong. And I was talking to my mom more about it. She actually drew a picture of what the thing looked like. And she also told me before that incident that night, her and her fiance, his brother and his date were going down the road, and her fiance's brother looked out of the back glass of the car when they were going down the road, and one had started following them. And she said they were scared to death. And that night, they went home and they all started carpooling to work. That's how bad it got, and that's how frightened a lot of them were. Well, a few years later, he come up missing. He's never been found. I've never seen his name on any missing persons list, and I thought that was odd because I thought, well, maybe I could find him somewhere on a missing persons list somewhere, because I had found her fiance's obituary from 2006, and his brother was still listed as missing. I found their sister's obituary. She died a few years later, and he was still listed as missing. From what I understand, he was coming home from work one night, never made it. My grandmother also had a story. I never paid it much attention until I recalled what happened to me and my mother that night, because my mother, like I said, my mother and I never discussed what happened to us ever between each other until I brought it up.
So what happened with your grandmother? Did you say something happened to your grandmother?
Yeah, she told a story twice that I remember. She said that she was coming home from work one night and she was going around a curve, and the curve had like a little hill that separated the curve in between it, and this thing had gone in front of her. It was directly over her car till she got to the curve. Then it flew over her, and she said she could see the glow from it on the other side of the curve, and she was terrified that when she rounded the curve, it was still going to be sitting there in the road. And she said that when she got around the curve, that it moved out of the way. She said that she just pushed the gas as far as she could, and she just held on to the steering wheel, and she said she just gave it all the gas she could. She only talked about it 2 times that I remember, but I never paid much attention to it until I recalled the night that my mother and my sister and I had our encounter.
And you said your sister was too young to remember?
Yeah, she was. I think she might have been 1 or 2 years old. She's 2 years younger than me, and I was around 4 at the time. But it's something I would never forget. And like I said, my mother, it's something that scared the wits out of her. I mean, she just did not like talking about it. We had a girl from NYU come down about 2 years ago and interview us for about 3 days. I haven't got to see the documentary yet. She talked to us for 3 days about what happened.
At Arizona State University, we've made online education better, smarter, and more personalized so you can go further in your aspiring field.
I decided to pursue medicine once I realized that ASU did have the online program for biological sciences. You're still required to learn the same curriculum. You're still being tested on the same content that anyone would be tested on in person. The comprehensiveness of the program prepared me so well for medical school.
Explore over 300 programs at asuonline.asu.edu. With so many options, Why choose Arizona State University?
For me, the only online option was ASU because of the quality. Their faculty was really involved with their students and care about your personal journey. The dedication to my personal development from my professors, that's been extremely valuable to me.
Earn your degree from the nation's most innovative university. Online. That's a degree better. Explore more than 300 undergraduate, graduate, and certificate programs at asuonline.asu.edu.
And she left, and I've tried to contact her. I've sent messages to her. She was Chinese. She did say that she was going back to China probably after she graduated. She was a senior at NYU. I picked her up from the airport in Huntsville and brought her here, and we spoke with her for about 2 or 3 days. But it's floating around out there somewhere. I've never got a chance to see it.
Now, when you and your mother and your sister all had this encounter, are you or was your mother aware, when you talked to your mother recently, was she aware of anyone else that witnessed it besides the three of you?
The night that we saw what we saw?
Yes.
No. I know that my uncle lived across the street from us. I don't really remember what time of the night it was when it happened, but she did not like talking about it. I was lucky that she even, mentioned to me and admitted to it, and I had to ask her about it before she would even talk about it, because I was thinking the other day, maybe she talked to my grandmother about it or my grandfather, but she never mentioned it around them, growing up. She said whatever it was, it had 3 legs that extended to the ground. And she said that she saw a hatch on it open, and there was some kind of like a ramp that came down to the ground. And she said when she saw that, that's when she grabbed us and took us inside. I was amazed that she never told me that story, because my mother, if she knows something, she can't keep a secret.
Now, so there's what we call, or I don't say we call, but ufologists call as trace evidence, when there's the grass burn that you're talking about, the circular burn mark, and that would have been a really great thing to investigate if people were involved. But I'm assuming that she didn't tell anyone or report this to anyone.
Well, that's when my military police training kicked in. I asked her, I said, why didn't you call somebody? Why didn't you tell somebody? She said they were locking people up down there that were reporting it. She said there was a lot of sightings down there, and they were putting people in mental hospitals that were reporting that stuff.
God.
So I said, well, I can kind of understand then if that's the case. But I know she told me that it got to the point where her and my grandmother and my uncles, they would work at the same places sometimes, and they would all carpool to work because they didn't want to drive out by themselves. That's how bad it got.
Wow. Amazing. So I guess you'd call this a flap. And can you tell me approximately what years this was happening?
This was, we've kind of went back and forth on the year. It was 1977 or 78. I think it was probably around the end of 77, but I remember it being warm that night. And I remember the guys in the trailer park working on a car talking about the Leonard Skinner crash.
Oh, isn't that bizarre you're saying that? Because I just talked about that yesterday.
Oh, really?
Isn't that crazy?
Yeah.
And I have a witness that's listening live right now that's bizarre. I just talked about the crash yesterday.